On we go, right, 7 topics, 2 minutes on each, a fantastic panel to debate and discuss them as well. Right, City Racing through its trials again at Newmarket this week to reasonable acclaim, and it looks as though Liverpool in April might be the site of the first ever City Racing. They're getting closer and closer, Barty. We've talked about it before. What are you thinking now?
Well, I can't say I'm over enamoured by it. What's it going to be? 5 furlong races?
5 furlongs.
Down on an
in the middle of a city,
yes.
Big crowd there, bringing racing to the people.
They hope there'll be a big crowd there, don't they? They don't guarantee there'll be a big crowd
in Liverpool a few days before the Grand National. It's sure.
Is it before?
Well, I would.
Be freezing.
I'm thinking so. Hughie, what do you think?
I think he's asking for trouble. You know, the surface. How are you going to get a good surface over 5 furlongs, which we know is going to be consistent? I think it could be a recipe for disaster.
I mean, we've just been talking significantly about welfare issues and concerns, and clearly the BHA, Richard, have had some of those concerns.
Yeah, I'm not particularly clued up on this issue, but it doesn't sound very sensible to me from hearing about it.
Well, you don't need to be that clued up. It's Andrews Bowen laying a proven surface down. Apparently the surface is quite deep, quite soft. 5 furlongs laid down, no problem with the surface. They've trialled it, flat track, horses brought in.
Well, there are plenty of racecourses around the place which are fairly city bound. I think it's a gimmick, really.
It sounds like a total gimmick. What's the point of it?
Yeah.
But if the idea is to bring horses into urban communities, show people horses, they can get a bit closer to the action, and that then might inspire them to go racing.
Might do, but get closer to the action. So if you go there as a racecar, punter for whatever, and you stand at the 4 furlong pole, so 6 times a few horses are going to whoosh past you and disappear into the distance. It'll look great on television.
Before the pop concert afterwards, is that right? I mean, that's the way it's all going, isn't it? So that, you know, I think my experience is that in the racecourse I go to are pretty well attended. There's a lot of people who enjoy it out. I don't really quite understand the need for this.
I think it's fair to say that my panel today have not exactly a ringing endorsement for City Racing. Right, Gigginstown now. It looks as though, even though he is gently weaning himself away from National Hunt Racing, Michael O'Leary and Eddie O'Leary and the Gigginstown team are still shuffling the jockey pack. Richie Forrestal's piece in the paper this week suggesting that Davy Russell had gone a few notches down. Now, the obvious conclusion to draw here, Barty, is who might, if that's the case, will he retain the ride on Tiger Roll in the Grand National if the horse gets there?
Yes, well, we're beginning of November?
Yeah.
December, January, 4 or 5 months. A lot can change in 4 or 5 months. Owners, trainers and jockeys have coming together, falling out, patch up relationships. I'm sure Davy Russell, while it might be a little bit in the back of his mind, April, he knows there's a lot of water under a lot of bridges to go between then and now.
Interesting, though, isn't it? The way they operate and the kind of the hierarchy of trainers and jockeys are very much kind of results based.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's they pay the bills. It's their horses. They can do what they like, really. In terms of choosing jockeys, it does seem quite tough out there. If you 1 minute you're flavour of the month and you be fully demanded, and the next minute you can be rejected. So I'm sure it's a pretty tough regime to work with.
Hughie, I mean, you've employed plenty of jockeys and you've had plenty of owners, I'm sure, tell you to put jockeys on, take them off. Do you now sort of try and sort of sit back and take a very philosophical view of it?
Well, yeah, I would say we haven't employed that many jockeys. We've obviously used a lot of jockeys. One tends to use the jockeys you know and that you trust, and you try to be as supportive as possible. So, as I think Ian's got it right, there's a lot of water to flow under the bridge before now and next April, and I suspect there'll be a lot of changes. And for all we know, Gigginstown might not have a racehorse next April, or they might have
one. I think they might still have one. And let's hope Tiger Roll makes it to the Grand National in his bid for a historic 3rd victory. And before you say it's not historic because Red Rum did it, it is historic because he did do it 3 consecutively, so pedants can go around that one. Riding weights. Should we raise the minimum weights for jockeys with us all getting bigger and our nutritional standards are rather different? Well, Richard, you're surely the right person to
I don't know
answer this
about
with
that,
your
but
medical background.
it's difficult, isn't it? I mean, the low weights is fairly historic, and the weights are really set to what's suitable for the horse, particularly flat racing and 2-year-olds and so on. They don't want to be carrying, weights too high. I'm sure that's the thinking, but obviously the human situation for jockeys, I mean, it is ridiculous, really, what we're asking grown men to do in terms of men of a normal size, and we know that humans are getting bigger as the generations go on. To be doing these tiny weights is ridiculously challenging and not very healthy, because the way the methods we know they resort to, some of them, to achieve those weights is really not what we should be doing. But they probably feel they've got no choice.
Is it time for a scientific study as to what horses can cope with, what 2-year-olds can cope with, and could we raise the weights?
I think the scientific study would be around for a long time yet. But, the only thing I would say is there are a lot of female jockeys coming through who are obviously slighter, and they can do the lower weights, and it gives them an opportunity to get their foot on the ladder. We've seen that with sort of Josephine, Nicola, and Holly latterly, so it's giving them opportunities to get into it, and now they ride as well as the men. So I agree with it. It must be hell for some of these jockeys doing the weight, but there's only so much some of these horses can take in terms of weight.
What are you thinking?
Well, it comes from a survey saying that an awful lot of apprentices couldn't claim their full allowance because they couldn't be light enough off the bottom weight.
So what's the point of them having the allowance in the first place?
Yes. So minimum weight will have to go up a little bit, yeah.
OK, safer gambling. There's been a big campaign of late to promote responsible gambling, and £1 billion was wiped off the share price of major firms the other day in the wake of the notion that online gambling could be reduced to £2 stake sizes.
Yes, it's a parliamentary...
Online roulette or online gaming, I should say.
It's a parliamentary report that wants to bring in the online stakes in line with what is now happening in the high street bookmakers. And it was an obvious loophole that when they put that £2 stake through last year...
On fixed odds betting terminals, that it would have to be reflected online.
Yes. No, it was a loophole.
That it should be, yeah.
That they would have to have. Of course, the slight problem with it, I mean, it is a little bit of a political exercise, because so long as when you go online, you can bet with anybody or on anything in any jurisdiction you want to, where there is or isn't a maximum stake. So in other words, the government in the UK can say to the big bookmakers, or all bookmakers who are based here, you can't have more than X, but they can't do it to Australia's a big punting nation. If you want to go and punt on an Australian site, the UK government can't do anything about it. So that it doesn't really close that loophole. If you are so determined to get through that loophole, you could easily do so. However, it allows our lovely politicians to say, we have done all that we can to stop this problem.
And be in no doubt with an election around the corner, Hughie, that gambling is a vote winner or loser at the moment.
Honestly, I don't think it's at the top of people's concerns when they're going to put their cross on the ballot paper.
Politicians believe it is anyway, whether it is or not.
I think they're wrong, probably. We should be promoting horse racing and punting in horse racing, because actually there is some element of skill in punting. What they're trying to stop is just meaningless betting on numbers. So it could help us in the long run if politicians put more pressure on just meaningless gambling, when actually horse racing gambling actually has an element of skill.
But then in which case it behoves our industry to start promoting gambling as an integral and important part of the sport, rather than to be frightened of gambling because its standing as a whole may not be what it was.
Yeah.
Is that fair enough?
Probably.
It'd be nice to see a better contribution from the bookmakers into horse racing. That's I know a slightly may seem an unrelated issue, but it's quite clear these fob team machines, they have to stop, really. I mean, you go into a retail book will be cut back. You go into a retail bookmakers now, it's just a load of people on fruit machines.
Well, I'm not sure they can cut them back any more than the £2 stakes
well, no,
they already have.
No, I think it's right they do that, but the problem is it's going to usually leave a huge gap, isn't it, in terms of the contribution?
Well, it has.
Yeah.
It has.
Yeah, but online gambling's taking over. The small retail shop is going to disappear because of online gambling. It's going to be one on the high street rather than 5 all next door to each other. So I don't, I think the fact that all the bookmakers are saying it's the end of us because we're getting taking away the fob tees is taking away bookmaking shop is actually a bit of a red herring, really, isn't it?
Well, respect for the buzzer and respect for the 2 minutes is definitely not a voting issue on this programme as we talk about Kempton Park, who looks to have got a bit of a stay of execution because the Spelthorne Borough Council aren't having it at the moment.
No,
as
they
a development site.
it is fulfilling its criteria as green. What do they call it? Green belt. Green belt. That's it. Yeah. So it's doing that brilliantly.
Well, it is. It's a profitable business on preserving green belt land.
Yes. So while it hasn't totally headed off the Jockey Club at the pass, it has created an even smaller gap for them to get through to close it and build on it and take the all-weather to Newmarket.
Would you be in favour of... Well, I don't even know why I'm asking. Presumably you're happy that Kempton's sticking around.
Well, we much prefer training in Berkshire to be going to Kempton than going to Newmarket, which we do fairly regularly anyhow, and sit on the M25. So Kempton is quite an easy run for us. Fair enough track, as long as you're not going on the inner track. Short of moving it to Newbury, we would be a bit upset if it closed and moved to Newbury, we'd be fine. But
performing a valuable function as a weather track, of course, people would be more up in arms about the loss of the jumps track, even though it's nowhere near as
profitable.
profitable.
I know that, and Nicky Henderson was very keen to get involved, wasn't to keep it. I mean, it's a historic track.
He said he was going to chain himself to one of the fences.
I didn't know that. But, I mean, when you've got real history behind a jump track, it's always sad to see to lose it. But I think that's great news if Kempton's maintained.
But it doesn't solve the problem with the Jockey Club's finances, does it, Ian? Which was the whole reason behind it in the first place. It was going to finance a renovation of Sandown. It was going to finance a new all-weather track in Newmarket.
But they got knocked back for the renovation of Sandown. That council said, no, you can't do that, didn't they, in any case? So
they did.
Yeah. Oh, the buzzer. We've got the buzzer loud now, so I know to stop.
It's louder, yeah.
3, 2,
We've turned it up.
1.
We've turned it up and we've put it on a... We've put it on a hearing loop for our guests as well. Right. Let's talk about Danny Braak. This is a very serious matter, and 2 minutes is not going to do it justice, really. £140 fine was his initial fine for being found to have tampered with his whip in order that it might be more effective. They've looked at this. He's now been given a 7-day ban, but the summary has not come back from the disciplinary panel yet, so it's quite difficult to talk about. He says it's ruined his life because of all the abuse he's getting on Twitter. But if he did tamper with his whip with the intention of making his whip hit the horse and hurt the horse harder, and the horse was found to be marked, then I'm not going to have a lot of sympathy with him. That is still an if, because he says that that's not the reason. It was just an honest mistake. Govey had a couple of rubber bands on his whip left over.
I mean, it's difficult to make a judgment here, but as it stands, if he did manipulate his will, it's utterly disgraceful, and there's completely no place for it. I was one general comment. I was on this programme a year ago to the day, I think.
No way.
And we talked about whips at length then, and my guess is in a year's time we'll still be talking about. At some point, we're probably going to have to throw the whip away, aren't we? I don't know, before we're forced to. But that we would have to discuss it. I mean, I was not an advocate of that, but situations like this don't help.
What do you think, Hughie?
Well, I'm not really in the loop, luckily, on this, but if you're saying he's right that he did temper it, I concur exactly with Richard.
He's saying that the rubber bands were there left over. Listen, it's a modified whip, and there's quite a simple penalty at the moment for a modified, which was a £140 fine. What the BHA have said is clearly that's not acceptable, but they had no precedent to go on because nobody's been fined or banned for a modified whip in the last 5-year period. So now they can open it up and look at it again.
Yes, what the regulator wants the BHA want to have a little look at it because his fine was £140. There was outcry is probably not quite the right word, but there was some discussion on social media that it should be more. And they said, probably that's right, but it hasn't happened for a long time, so we're going to have a look at it.
Oh, you got two buzzers there, just to give you a warning, just to give you fair warning.
Yes. Shut up. Probably, I mean, to be honest, in Danny Brock's case, with this, it's become a little bit more of a storm because of what he said about it in the recent weeks or so.
Yes.
Whether he got hijacked by a journalist to give a quote and it's blown up because of what the Racing Post says, I don't know. But he would possibly have been better going forward to have shut up a while ago, because he can't make it any better for himself now.
Now, Robbie Downie is hard not to feel a little sympathy for, because he has been banned for failing a test for metabolites of cocaine in France by France Gallo, and that ban has to be reciprocated by the BHA, but he has undertaken his own personal research from a recognised laboratory who have all returned negative tests with hair samples. It's quite similar to the Robert Havlin case, this.
Yes.
Now, what can the BHA do now, or the PJA do, to help Robbie Downie?
Very well. It's a tricky one, isn't it? Because what you're faced with here, and I don't want to sound jingoistic, but I do go there every month, a French, no. The French angle in this is, we're right, end of story. They're not there. They are showing little signs of wanting to budge, and that would be in the national characteristic. And being so close as United Kingdom and France are, the BHA are very, very unlikely to start major change or not adhering to the reciprocation of rules.
But he has gone to an independent laboratory and proven that he has got no trace of cocaine in his system from a hair sample, which can give you historic use of cocaine as well. You can see why he feels significantly aggrieved.
You can, and it's quite difficult to make a judgment here without really understanding all the facts. But yeah, if he genuinely hasn't taken it and he genuinely feels he's got the evidence, then he's bound to feel completely aggrieved. It's a bit hard to understand the first test then.
But
the French test.
This has happened before, and again, it's a very different case. But it's a question of reciprocity between racing authorities, isn't it? And whether you are protected by your own authority or whether your own authority takes the side of the reciprocal.
Yeah,
one.
I think if you're going to, you can't pick and choose, and if that's what the French say, the BHA probably have no option.
Well, I think it'll run. I know Robbie Downie has been in touch with this programme. I wasn't able to get in touch with him this morning, but he's been in touch with this programme to express his discontent with the situation. I think the PJA are going to take up the cause on his behalf. Subscribe to Racing TV to be notified when more Luck on Sunday videos are appearing online. And don't forget to join me for the show every Sunday morning from 9 o'clock with the best guests.